I think probably the most misunderstood thing is athletes only know how to do sports and nothing else. Hi, I'm Adele Tan. I'm a national shooter and today I'm here to answer all of your questions. Any advice for athletes who are struggling to improve, especially when their teammates look down on them? For me, working with a team is very important, and even though my team is very small, but we provide each other extremely close emotional support. So my advice is to always seek help from a professional, for example, a therapist or a psychologist, especially when I find that I have trouble getting along with teammates. Firstly, seek help from a professional, because if you seek help from your teammates, most of them are around the same age as you and they might not have enough life experiences to give you a very good advice. How do you maintain your cool under pressure, especially when your opponents are tough? I think one thing special about shooting is it is not really a competition with our opponents. Especially during the finals, it is more of an individual kind of fight. That is something special about shooting. And I think the key about shooting is not actually being tough or cool when we compete with our opponents, but rather being cool during extremely tense situations. For example, during the Olympics, it was probably the highest tension that I have probably experienced, and the key wasn't to be cool when I'm against my competitors, but more of being cool in the intense atmosphere. Have your parents always been supportive of your choices? How do I convince them to let me do what I love? I started shooting when I was 12. Back then, sports really wasn't a big thing in Singapore, and the reason why my parents allowed me to do sports is because I was preparing for my PSLE and it was very stressful during that time. So they actually signed me up for this course only for fun. And who knows, 1 year later I got selected into sports school, and that's how my journey began. How do you convince your parents to do what I like to do? Is to simply be very frank, be very open with them. For me, I just simply told them that I actually enjoy this sport a lot. They could tell that I enjoy this sport whenever I was in the shooting range. And compared to all our friends who only know how to study, especially in the social construct of Singapore, it would be good to expose yourself to other things such as arts, sports, things that you enjoy. What is the most misunderstood thing about being an athlete? It could be any assumptions that the public has about you. I think the category of being a professional athlete is we only know how to do sports. Especially in Singapore, I feel that it's extremely dangerous because we have to understand the social construct, we have to understand Singapore. That's why I'm very firm about having other things outside of sports. I feel that it is important. As much as I do sports 99%, I still make sure I still have 1% in other areas of my life. Probably the most misunderstood thing is athletes only know how to do sports and nothing else. Yeah. How do you juggle with school, training and other commitments in life? I was exposed to this kind of hectic lifestyle since I was 13 years old. By now, it already become a habit. Pre-COVID times, our traveling schedule is at least twice a month. So it was very tough to juggle with education, especially during the years where I was doing my national exams like O-levels and IB. It was extremely tough. But I was very lucky because the support system that I was in, my teachers arranged one-to-one sessions with me every morning at 6:30 AM. So even in uni right now, I'm still able to work one-to-one with my professors through this program called the Spike Scholarship. We are able to have one-to-one guidance with not just our dietitian, our psychologist, but also one-to-one guidance with our teachers, our career guidance. So I think that is something good, and it is a positive sign that sports in Singapore is going somewhere. What was your biggest setback throughout this journey and how has it shaped you? My biggest setback was probably when I was 17-18 years old, because the usual pathway of the A-levels or IB route is only 2 years. But back then I decided to extend my entire journey to 4 years. One of my goals to achieve when I did such an unconventional thing was to actually qualify for certain major games, for example, the Asian Games, the Commonwealth Games, the SEA Games. But instead of meeting this goal, I actually did not qualify for all 3 consecutively, and I only missed out by 0.1 and 0.2 points. It was quite a huge blow. So I guess that was probably my lowest point in my career thus far. And that is why I am quite open to share about this, because what the audience see is the glory of standing on the Olympic stage. But what people don't see is every step that has led me to where I am today. If you could try a different type of sport, what would it be and why? To be very frank, I will try something similar to shooting, which is like archery. The reason is because I'm not very gifted in those kind of physical sports. I don't actually run very fast, and my 2.4 has always been very mediocre. My talents are more related to focus, endurance, which is very shooting kind of style. Do you have any advice for those who wish to enroll into Singapore Sports School? I would say that place was one of the key factors which allow me to be who I am today. It is not that easy to climb from zero to something, and you need the correct support system. It is one thing to have support system, and it is another thing to have the correct support system, because there's no point having help which you don't need. You need help which is targeted to your needs specifically. And at sports school, the program is extremely customizable. My career pathway might be different from my good friend, and that is something very common in the entire school. And another thing to note is the entire class might be off for overseas competitions together. So a common scene is everyone disappearing in the middle of the class for overseas competitions, and that has become a norm. But one thing good about sports school is the teachers allow one-to-one makeup class. In fact, the education system there specializes on this kind of one-to-one tutoring to allow students to catch up. What was your biggest accomplishment? I think so far in my 10 to 11 years of doing sports, the biggest accomplishment thus far would be qualifying for the Olympics and playing on the Olympic stage. Actually, the journey here isn't as glorifying as it seems, because I have missed out on Olympic qualifications twice. The first time was in 2018 at the World Championships. Only the top 4 placings qualified for the Olympics, but I was 5th. And the second time, I missed out on the Asian Championships because I had to go for my IB examinations. And finally, the third time round, it was the final qualification for Tokyo, which I qualified for. So I think in the past decade, this is probably the biggest accomplishment. What is the best piece of advice that your psychologist shared with you that stuck with you forever? It would be comfortable with the uncomfortable situations, because most of the time when you meet with something uncomfortable or when you face discomfort, the initial instinct is to run away. But I guess after so many years of knowing myself and working with my psychologist, sometimes it would be good and I have to face the uncomfortable situations. Just stand there and face it, How did you join the national team? So an interesting fact, back when I was 13, I was actually the very first batch of shooters in sports school. And at the age of 14, we took part in some competitions locally, and our scores hit the national team scores. That was how a few of my friends and we entered the national team when we were 13, 14 years old. What are your thoughts on athletes getting backlash for not winning competitions? Well, my honest thoughts about this is, in the past it does affect me, because the expectations for athletes, especially when we travel to big major competitions, is very high. But we also have to take a step back and think. Especially in Singapore, when you are given 2 choices, the first choice is most of the people would choose a more stable career and job outside when you are actually paid. But sports, most of us, we do it for passion, and we do it because we enjoy it. My thoughts about athletes getting backlash. I know of very high-performing athletes that have suffered from many mental health issues, and when I hear about their stories, I just feel so wow, so inspired. So most of the time the public sees the result, but they don't actually know what is going on behind every individual athlete's life and how they got to where they are today. I think be understanding, step into the athlete's point of view and why they feel certain ways. When we face certain situations with empathy, it is easier to understand why people make certain decisions. Share with us more on why you think mental health is as important as physical health. I feel that mental health is extremely important, especially in current context. And the reason why I became so focused on mental health is because, as I mentioned earlier, a few years back when I was at my lowest point in my career, mental health really wasn't a big thing back then, and I did not know how to seek help. After I seek help with my psychologist, I realized that, hey, I'm doing better not just in sports, but in all areas of my life, That is why I began speaking up. And the moment I spoke up, actually a lot of young kids, they message me, they DM me about their problems. But the thing is, I'm not a professional psychologist. I am not able to give proper advice, which is why I always tell people, please seek help from a therapist or a psychologist. Mental health is very important because certain triggers might trigger you, especially when you compete. Go with the flow, let go, and don't be so hung up on things. Because when I was younger, I was an extreme perfectionist. I wasn't able to let go of my mistakes. But as I grow older, I know how to let go, I know how to go with the flow. If you really enjoy something and if you really have passion for something, regardless of whether it is sports, arts, or even your education, pursue it fiercely, because don't look back 5 years later or 10 years later to regret that decision you did not take. Right now at 22, I realized that, hey, actually it's possible to juggle elite sports and rigorous studying schedule at the same time. We do have the support system, we just need more people to step up to do this kind of unconventional pathways in Singapore at a very high level.